Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 41 with Anthony Mandelli. He is a fellow University of Delaware alumni, and we got reconnected recently over social media, so I'm really excited to be able to reconnect and catch up with him and share all the cool stuff that he's doing right now as a digital marketer and somebody who's specializing in data and analytics and just kind of geeking out about all that kind of good stuff. So really share some really cool, broad insights just to kind of how the world is going and how to kind of properly use data. Reminds me of our previous episode on the topic that I'll make sure to link out to in the show notes. Also down there, you'll find all of the awesome books that Anthony recommends. So definitely take a peek and add a couple of those to your wish list or library. And just really appreciate Anthony's time and all that he shared. He's really doing cool stuff, and just appreciate that he also just really geeks out about Lord of the Rings. Good stuff. But after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 41 with Anthony Mandelli. This episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast is brought to you by Top Hat, the teaching app that makes active learning come to life. Top Hat helps thousands of professors create their perfect course. Our app is easy to use and allows you to engage your class, adopt next-generation textbooks, and run tests, all within a secure digital environment. See why faculty in over 700 colleges and universities across North America trust Top Hat to power their classrooms. Visit tophat.com/higheredgeek. That's tophat.com/higheredgeek. Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and jump in here. I really appreciate you making some time here for the podcast. So I feel like you have a very interesting professional journey, doing some pretty cool different stuff. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about that, and as well as what's kind of capturing your attention, what you're geeking out about. So if you just want to introduce yourself to everybody real quick and just give kind of the quick version of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
My name is Anthony Mandelli. I'm a marketing manager with Snowplow Analytics, which is a data collection platform. Originally, I had set out to be an English teacher. So I studied English education in school, and as an undergraduate worked in the admissions office, which introduced me to the world of higher education administration and just that career path in general. And that's where I ended up after graduating in higher education, doing some marketing and social media work. And that really, it's not where I am now, but that really, really set the stage for sort of everything that was to come afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I feel like, I can tend to see now, like talking through with people and looking through their LinkedIn profiles or something, like is always that kind of connective tissue that leads to the next thing, so I think that's what I could kind of tell from your journey. But I guess just to kind of go a little bit chronologically, like talk a little bit more, like we both went to University of Delaware, always holds a special place in my heart, but sort of like with your experience there, we crossed paths in like some like leadership classes and stuff. I know you're really involved as well. What do you feel like your college experience gave you personally and or professionally that still kind of resonates with you today?
Sure. Well, I studied English and philosophy and leadership at UD, and it didn't start out that way. I started out studying, as I said, English education, and what I really, really value about having spent about my time at UD was the fact that they gave you so many opportunities to explore different things that I realized I came into my program with a pretty clearly defined picture of what I thought my life after graduation was going to look like. Mm-hmm. But just in experiencing so many different programs, so many different classes and opportunities, it really made me stop and think about that. And realizing that I didn't want to be in the classroom was really a really big moment for me, because I was sort of going from that, I'm studying. I think. Let me say this. I think a lot of people feel very pressured, especially when they're starting college or even when they're in high school, to know exactly what they want to study and know exactly what kind of job they want to get with that degree. That's a tremendous amount of pressure that students can feel. And when I told my parents that I was dropping the education part of my major and I was going to pick up some minors, their first thought was, "What are you going to do with that?" Or that was their response, like, "What job are you going to get with that?" And in the beginning, I didn't really know, uh, but it was the fact that I worked on campus that made me realize, well, the skills that I'm learning in this English program, the skills that I'm learning in my other classes, you don't need to, like, I can take these skills anywhere. I can work in the admissions office, which was what I ended up doing and something I was really passionate about. But once you kind of realize that what you're not learning, you're learning skills that aren't really always one-to-one applicable to what you're going to be doing in a job in a career. You realize that what I can do this for, I can do this for a pharmaceutical company, I can do this for a rock band, I can do this for a nonprofit, whatever this might be. And that was what really, UD, like, I'm so thankful for what I was able to do there, because I was able to, put my hands into a bunch of different projects and kind of say, I don't need to box myself into one thing. I like doing a lot of stuff, and that's totally possible.
Yeah, and that's like, yeah, it's like this very like kind of broad, overarching kind of point of view that, yeah, it sounds like you got when you were at University of Delaware, and it's like, yeah, like you said, like sometimes there's a lot of, yeah, like that pressure put on students coming into an institution to have that, plan set, and exactly what, career you're leading to, and I think that's sometimes a lot of the external pressures that we put on higher ed as well to be this sort of like career pipeline or factory, that sort of thing. But it's like what college has always been is just this place to sort of broaden your mind and open your horizons and those sort of things. And that's, it tends to be what's very valuable in sort of today's world as well, is just like critical thinking and like comfortable with like ambiguity, or just sort of like an appreciation of, kind of the complexities that make modern life reality. So, yeah, it's like, it sounds like, yeah, you got some of those skills and everything. And it's kind of, yeah, I think especially, yeah, like well, I guess maybe if you want to focus on a little bit, because I'm just curious, because you sort of had that philosophy about like, I don't know if you maybe got it afterwards from working in admissions or not, but like what was that like specifically? Because I haven't really talked with too many people that work really like closely in that area. Was that something that you kind of developed later on, or like do you kind of credit a little bit of like your experience at University of Delaware for sort of like forming your point of view in terms of just like like how students kind of come into university?
I think a lot of it started when I was an undergraduate at the University of Delaware. It was the leadership program that really introduced me. It got me thinking this way. So I minored in leadership studies, focusing on leadership by design, with Professor Anthony Middlebrooks, and we did a lot of work that looked at the intersection between design thinking, education, and leadership, and how they all work to reinforce each other in the right environment. And working with Professor Middlebrooks, I was very fortunate to take several of his classes and to do an independent study with him. And working with him, I realized that that work was just so fascinating and so interesting. And I had no idea that this is the kind of stuff that I could be doing with a leadership program. And I think part of that came from the fact that departments tend to be very, very siloed. And now, we're starting to see a big emergence of like cross-departmental, cross-discipline projects and classes, and much more collaboration on across departments and programs on college campuses. But it wasn't really like that. And that's what was so great about the work I was doing in the leadership program, because we had projects that were, cross-disciplinary with like the art program, landscape architecture, a lot of really, really cool, interesting stuff. And, that was when I realized that that helped me realize, what I was studying. I wasn't studying, I wasn't trying to be a doctor. I wasn't trying to be a lawyer, but I also didn't know that I wanted to be a digital marketing professional for higher education, or a digital marketing professional with a focus on complex technology. Like these weren't things that I was conscious of. It just made me realize that what I was going to be doing after graduation was a much more it was much more nuanced than just be a doctor or a lawyer. And I think a lot of people tend to have a very reductive view of what their future is, because it's really nice to be able to say, I'm going to go to college, then I'm going to go to med school, and then I'm going to be a doctor. And I'm not in any way saying people shouldn't want those things, but it's okay to say, I want to study history and I don't know what I'm going to do with that afterwards, but this is the medium that will allow my studies to most enrich my life, and that's why I want to study history. And that's a perfectly legitimate, reasonable approach to why you choose whatever it is you choose to study. Leaving off that, what are you going to do after you graduate part? There's really nothing wrong with that, because these careers that we have, another common way to say it is the jobs that people are going to have when you graduate don't even exist yet,
Right.
which is really true. The company I work for right now was founded in 2012, so after graduation. So the job I have now literally did not exist when I was an undergraduate.
Yeah. Well, because I think, yeah, a couple of things there that definitely resonate with me. It's like, I am literally that history major. Like, because like I thought that I was going to be like a high school history teacher. It's one of the common things you can do with that. And sort of similarly to you, I dropped the education part. I picked up the leadership minor. I'm not even sure how I really like stumbled into it, but it was like the summer before my senior year, the prospect of like student teaching for the entirety of the year, kind of consuming it. I was just like, you know what, I've kind of soured on this. It doesn't feel like really what I want to do anymore after doing some like observations and continuing to take all of like the classes and everything. So all that respect for education. I was an RA for 2 years. Going into my senior year, I made that decision to kind of shift, and yeah, that's when I did a lot of leadership classes. And I mean, my senior year as a whole was like the best year for me, and those classes were my favorite classes. And you know, I know what my history major gave to me, you know, an appreciation for context, you know, like the story of the world, or even just like within an organization or anything like that. You know, nothing happens in a vacuum. So yeah, it's like, you know, you kind of make sense of your own narrative, or just, you know, advocating for folks to, yeah, like kind of follow their interests, especially when they're at college. It's an environment that's conducive to that. And I think that can enable you, like you said, for jobs that you didn't even know existed or didn't even exist. Because like for me, like working in this sort of higher ed adjacent space, it's like I didn't know a lot of this stuff existed, but just knowing like, you know, people who take this path that I talk to a lot, it's just like, just be more open-minded about what you might want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, there's so much opportunity out there to take whatever it is that you want, whatever it is that you want to study or you want to learn, and to apply it in new and interesting ways. And more often than not, you know, that's what people are looking for, is to say like, well, you know, my background might not be what you're expecting, but I really understand, you know, X or Y about your space, and I think I would have a really interesting point of view on how to approach this job or this task, whatever it might be. And you know, the English program at UD was amazing, because it taught me like incredible critical thinking skills, and just a certain type of analysis that I wouldn't be where I am if I never got. There's been tons and tons of awesome articles all the way, you know, from major publications about the benefits of hiring people who studied humanities and social sciences. There was a great article about someone by someone who said, you know, why I hire English majors, and you know, he basically talked about the soft skills that you get, and you know, even several other like counselors and advisors that I've spoken to, with, you know, they say when you study these hard sciences or engineering, math, physics, biology, subjects like that, it's your skills that you're learning are sort of directly applicable to what you do next, whether that's in a career or in like graduate school. But the skills that you learn when you study humanities and social sciences, they don't manifest themselves in a career until further along the career path. So you're going to spend the first few years of your career typically feeling like what you've learned in your classes is not applicable at all. But then all of a sudden, you know, you find yourself in a more senior role of having a leadership position, because you were an English major and you know how to analyze certain situations in ways that other people can't. Or, you know, you're a marketing manager because you understand the finer points of communicating a brand's value more than other people. Or, you know, or you're a history major who suddenly has a much more senior operational role because you understand the broader context of the decisions that you're making, things like that. And then now I'm in this place where suddenly all of these skills that, I built up are coming back in a way that's much more direct and much more obvious.
Yeah, because I think it's like the missing piece is just like they don't frame them in the
Hmm.
because I was just talking to another podcast guest about this is like the English major is like the punchline for whatever reason, but I think like that's probably the most like like you're saying, like critical thinking, like those are all the things that you really need. And like for me it's like I found what history learning about it has given me, but it's just like I think part of the puzzle that's missing is that they don't frame what you're learning in that way. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that is leading more towards like, okay, these
Hmm.
hard functional skills, you're like learning how to engineer something by learning how to build a thing that you would build, and like it's very kind of kind of clear and kind of structured that way.
Hmm.
But if it's almost like you don't frame it that way, you allow it to be more flexible and sort of just like this tool in your tool belt that could be kind of like multi-purpose, where it's just like I can apply this to any number of situations versus just the one example that you I don't know, did or what like I feel like that's
Right,
part of it or
right.
something. But so it's really cool that you've kind of found that part of your narrative, and the skills and things that you've learned, and you've had like a diversity of work experiences now after graduation that have led you, like you said, this job that literally did not exist when you graduated. So you're at Snowplow Analytics now. What led you there? Like, what do you enjoy most about your current work? And then we'll kind of move on from there.
So I started my career out in higher education and marketing, and this is I very much coming from that former education major background. I have that respect for education, and that was always something that was really important to me. So working in higher education in administration really just seemed like a no-brainer, because I had an opportunity to do marketing, which I felt that played well with the skills I built as an English major. So I worked at several colleges and universities in New Jersey and New York over the 4 years or so after graduating. Um, Moving further and further away from that admissions role and more into a pure marketing role. And then I sort of got slapped with the, like, you're young, you understand technology. Can you help us with some of our IT infrastructure? And as a huge nerd, I was like, absolutely, like throw it at me. I'll learn everything there is to know about this. And so I really discovered that. Well, I already knew that I was a huge nerd, but I realized that there was an opportunity to take some of these, like this interest in technology that I had outside of work, and apply it more directly to work. So on the one hand, I was doing a lot of digital marketing, which it really was mostly social media and email. And this was an interesting time to be doing social media because, I started doing this a bit in my jobs as an undergraduate on campus, but 2009, 2010, social media was really bursting onto the scene as a legitimate marketing channel. It wasn't like it is now. You know, 8 to 10 years later. So, and that was something. I worked with someone at the University of Delaware who, I honestly, I owe a lot of my success now and where I am now to someone I worked with, two people in the Office of Communication and Marketing, Ryan McGuire, who was sort of my internship supervisor, and the department head, Meredith Chapman, who unfortunately passed away a couple months ago. So shout out to Meredith, who was an incredible mentor as a marketing professional and just as a human being in general. But she had the foresight to get the University of Delaware on Twitter and to, really take ownership of our Foursquare locations on campus. We were one of the first schools on Google Plus with a profile, and while the Google Plus profile hasn't really panned out to much, it was, the more important thing was that she was willing to experiment, and that was really in the spirit of social media. And social media like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, those are the big ones at the time. Was really the overlap in the Venn diagram of like marketing stuff and technology stuff, because it was just pure marketing technology. and it was really that was really fascinating. That was really interesting. And the more I spent learning about social media and how the analytics work, and I've read some great books on this topic, it made me realize that this I really enjoy this intersection of marketing and technology. And it took me about a year and a half of soul searching to really understand this. But from the moment I started doing social media professionally, I realized I was, from that moment on, trying to move my career into a point where I could really do have like basically a 50-50 split between marketing work and tech work. And that's finally where I am now.
Very cool. Because yeah, I think especially just for higher ed to remain kind of relevant, and I mean, there's just so much kind of competition in the marketplace now. Yeah, just like that's when I hear people talk about that, I know some people that work in that space in higher ed and stuff. It's like it still feels like we're not wholly there yet, but yeah, I'm glad just within your kind of professional journey you found that sort of sweet spot. And well, I guess you mentioned just kind of generally, that stuff that you kind of geek out about and everything. So I guess you want to explore that a little bit more, or just kind of the stuff kind of personally that you enjoy. Like what are you geeking out about currently? Is it stuff that you've discovered more recently, or stuff that you've always been into? But yeah, just kind of share that, and then we'll dig in a little bit more.
Something that I have really started geeking out about in like true full tilt 100% fashion has been my longstanding love of J.R.R. Tolkien. So just a quick plug for this. The Tolkien estate has been publishing a lot of work recently. So that if you're into Lord of the Rings, check out some of the supplemental materials that have been published in the past few years. They're all pretty fantastic. But outside of that, my professional interests and my personal interests have always been very, very closely aligned. And I think I would have said that was a coincidence if you had asked me 2 years ago. But looking back on it now, I can see that it was very much by design. What always interested me about social media is the fact that we have this. It really comes down to data. And data is something that I just have learned to be this incredibly powerful force in the modern world that has so much potential for good, but as we've seen recently, also has the potential to do a lot of harm. When I read a great book by a scientist out of Northeastern University, Albert Barabashi, and the book is called Bursts. And in it, he talks about an experiment that his lab did with Twitter, where they basically took, they took a language library, an English library, and did a sentiment analysis on tweets, live tweets around the Super Bowl one year. And what they did is they created a map of the United States, and there were circles to represent all of the major cities. And these circles would change color in real time based on how positive or negative the tweets coming out of each city were. So you could see in real time when one team scored, you could see exactly across the country who was really happy about it and who was really angry about it. And it was a really cool project. But he in describing that, he said in the book that for the first time in history, with this new digital media, and we have empirical evidence about human behavior that we've never had before. And this completely changes the way that we look at historical events, we look at human behavior, we look at how society develops, how we look at the international economics. And that was a really big eye-opening moment for me. And again, once I started really diving into the data side of enrollment management and admissions, I was able to see that we can look at this data that we have about our students and proactively look to notice patterns that, yes, will help us be more effective in enrolling our students, but will also help us detect and see what common denominators our most successful students have on campus. We could look to identify at a much larger scale what we're doing right as administrators and where we need work. And that seemed to be a really, really powerful like concept that, at least at the time when I was in higher education, wasn't it wasn't as prevalent. One of the schools I worked at had a brand new data science program, which was going to be a huge part of our recruitment in the coming cycle. Um, so I had suggested, why not get some of these data science students or professors or faculty to work on some projects. We get the benefit of the result of the work. They get to do some hands-on experience, and they can talk about how great their program is working with the campus itself. And there was zero interest in that collaboration. Um, which was mind blowing to me. And yes, I'm sure there were factors that I wasn't considering, but or wasn't even aware of. But the ultimate point was, we had the ability to do something really, really cool, and it was just not really. I don't think that that idea would have the same reception today as it did 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm really geeking out about data. I love working with computers and technology, and there's a lot of really cool ways to do that. Looking at like programming languages like R, Python, refreshing myself on SQL and how databases work. And it's been a really cool way for me to have some directed learning and exploring something that is a pretty big topic. Programming is a big topic, and without taking any sort of classes or doing any sort of programs, anything you can do to help direct your learning is going to be really helpful in getting you from each level as you progress. And having this, like I enjoy working with data, and I have data from work that I can play around with. There's tons of free data samples out there. There are amazing organizations that help people get connected with free public data sets. The United States in general has been being more open about their data. A lot of cities and will provide municipal data sets and let people work with it. There's a great organization I'm part of called Data for Democracy, which is a really amazing group of people who work together to look at things like crime rates and other urban data sets, and model it to help these different communities do different projects. So it's a really, really great time to be interested in data, because even though there's some not some great stuff happening with data, these are kind of the hard knocks that we need along the way. Because when you think about who are the biggest data companies out there, when you think of Google, you think of Amazon, you think of Facebook. These companies have data on users in a completely unprecedented way. We've never had a company like this before, and we don't know what the implications are of having access to that much data on a single person, and we don't really know what the right limits and regulations are for something like that, and we don't even know what the implications of trying to regulate something like Google really are. So there's a lot of unknowns, and we're going to take some bumps along the way. But if you think about California's recent data privacy legislation, you think about the European Union with the GDPR, which went into effect this past May. Collectively, we're getting smarter about data. We're understanding the impact it can have on our lives. We're understanding how much of it is out there, and we're developing a healthy respect for it. So if you're interested in data, now is a really, really great time to be in this scene.
Yeah, because I think it's people will sort of play within the sandboxes that you put them in, and I think up until this point, it's been kind of like you're saying. I mean, it's unprecedented territory. It's kind of like a Wild West frontier here, I think some bad apples, some irresponsible people shouldn't have people say we should not collect any data. Data is bad. It's just no, those people used it improperly, so they should be sort of held responsible for that. And the outcomes of responsible people using data responsibly, they could be really good stuff. And like you're saying, I think some people, are kind of skittish, but it's especially if it was like, oh, a student at the institution using data from the institution, it's like, okay, well, as long as there's not any like personally identifiable information attached to it, it's just anonymous, sort of like, oh, this many of like this class does this thing, but it's like, yeah, like you said, like 3 years ago, I'm sure people are, just more unaware, and maybe, some people now are probably skittish, and it's like, okay, yeah, good. There's good reason to just be cautious or be sort of, kind of considerate in how you're doing things. But I think, just more transparency and like proper sort of regulations just to make sure that we're, just making sure that people are being responsible, is all good things. So yeah, it's really interesting because I think, if you do these sort of studies and you can just like build programs or things to like just help nudge people towards behaviors, like it's just seeing, and being able to track, if you make a change, that one variable and see how it affects that, like, right. Like in social media, it's like all these people just sort of like voluntarily, submitting information that you can then, curate and everything. So, really interesting to see just kind of how it continues to evolve in different facets of society. Because it's just any number of different things. But when you mentioned, a book that you're reading as well, so I guess. I'm just curious, is there anything else like on this topic or just in general, Lord of the Rings or, whatever, any kind of geekdoms, fandoms, like anything that you're reading, watching, and or listening to that you'd want to mention so we can include it in the show notes?
Oh, sure. So I recently read a great book by Nate Silver called The Signal and the Noise. Nate Silver is pretty big in the world of statistics. He sort of gained his prominence through correctly predicting the outcomes of several primary elections, it's a really great book just about statistics and looking at numbers overall. And so that was a really interesting read. And another book called Algorithms to Live By, which was I absolutely love this book to the point where my family and close friends are sick of hearing about it. Where the authors look at different types of algorithms that are typically used in computer science, but show how they're actually the some of the fundamental ways that we as humans solve problems in our daily lives, from things like trying to decide, should I listen to new music or listen to an album that I already like? How do I optimally serve pot roast to guests at my party? Or, when I'm looking for a parking spot, do I just take this one that I see, or do I try and get one that's closer to my building? So that was a really, really fascinating book. And the last book, I have to say, I haven't started this one yet, but I'm really excited to. It's by Michael Lewis, who wrote The Big Short, which is one of my favorite books of all time. Mm-hmm. This book is actually he wrote a book specifically where the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman has sort of resurfaced as one of the most preeminent texts on thinking and metacognition that you can possibly find. So, Thinking Fast and Slow, if you haven't already heard of it, is a very widely regarded, high quality book. Like every list of must reads, it's out there. But Michael Lewis, the author of The Big Short, wrote a book called The Undoing Project, which is actually about Kahneman when he was doing that research. So it's really interesting to have one of your favorite authors writing about another author that you really respect. So that's something that I'm really excited to start as my next book.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's kind of like any of those, sometimes the story behind the story can be as right. good, or sometimes maybe even better, because it adds to the appreciation of maybe the kind of the original there. But cool. We'll link out to all that stuff. But yeah, we'll wrap up the episode here on the optimistic note that I always love to end on. So, what is something or things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world?
So I'm really looking forward to. I get to travel a lot for work, and this September I'll be going to Helsinki in Finland for an event. And I've never been to Finland before, so I'm really looking forward to that. And in my spare time, I'm working on writing a program that has a list, a database of all of the books that I own, and will randomly generate a new title because I have so many books and I read so much that I never know what to read next. And I decided I don't want that burden anymore. So I wrote a program to pick one of my books at random for me.
Well, I guess, yeah, because I think sometimes people, yeah, they like have this bookshelf full of books and maybe they haven't like read or fully read all of this. So it's like, yeah, like, or it's like choosing a movie or something. I'm sure
Right.
that if like, that program works and you're like, wow, like this has been really helpful to me. It's like, let me try to see if I could like use this for TV shows and movies or like, something
Absolutely.
like that, or like figuring out dinner or something. I don't know, like, cause yeah, it's like all those struggles. Cause I think it's really cool. Like you mentioned that book that kind of, you know, I think for me, and I'm sure for maybe a lot of other people, it's like, some of these new developments and technologies or tools or whatever, they can kind of seem like larger than life. And it's like, I don't, you can't even fathom like what it
Hmm.
means or how it would work. But then like really applying it in these very like small day to day ways that like makes people's lives just a little bit easier. Like you're saying, like, I feel like me and my wife have that kind of like disagreement sometimes is like, do you take that spot that you see right there? Or you try to get the closer one, you loop around a bunch
Right.
of times or whatever. I'm like, I usually just try to take the spot that I see first. But,
Mhm.
like, yeah, does it make more sense because you walk less or, like how much time are you going to spend looking for a spot or whatever? So it's like, yeah, like, well, like, data
Right.
shows, yada, yada, yada.
37% is apparently the mathematically optimal number. It's based on an old math problem called the secretary problem, which is basically if you're trying to hire a secretary and you're doing interviews, how do you know, like, okay, you interviewed someone who's really awesome, but you've only interviewed three people. How do you know the next person isn't going to be even better? And apparently, according to this book, and I'm sure you're going to get 1,000 emails from mathematicians and statisticians who are going to correct all of my finer points. But basically, when you say like, okay, I'm going to interview 100 candidates. After 37, you take the best candidate who is better than those first 37. And whether it's hiring someone, whether it's searching for a house or searching for a parking spot, given certain conditions, this is apparently the mathematically optimal way to choose a parking spot or a new house or hire someone.
But I guess that would, yeah, like make sense in because, yeah, and I wonder if somebody were to do a study like that on dating, how that would apply, because that's the idea. Like you see something good, but you like,
Hmm.
oh, maybe there's something better, and it's like, yeah, like parking spots and houses everywhere. Like you're dating, and it's like, well, this person's pretty cool, but I don't know, like maybe there's somebody better. But it's like, yeah, you've gone on 37 dates, and that person's amazing, then go for it. Don't like, get too in your head about it, but. Because yeah, it's like that fine line. It's like yes, like because yeah, I mean definitely like in interviews, I interviewed 37 people. I feel like I have a pretty good idea of like type of people that obviously like applied within like sort of a
Right.
reasonable amount of time and maybe have a diversity of experiences and skills and stuff. So yeah, that I feel like that checks out just sort of intuitively to me. That I would not feel like I don't know many more than that would be because it's like the time that, like the time that you're spending on anything versus just like like going
Right.
with something good that you have already. So yeah, very interesting stuff. Well, good. Well, yeah, really interesting conversation. I think yeah, just definitely a lot to chew on and good books to check out, and yeah, just really appreciate your time and
Of course.
yeah, just yeah, enjoy the rest of your week.
All right. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks for talking to me and letting me just go on about all the things that I like and have been thinking about.
No, yeah, it's all good stuff, and I think yeah, continue some good sort of topics and conversations from previous episodes. So yeah, I mean, definitely a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but that's what I like. Is I like talking to people that have some different insights and stuff than my day to day. So yeah, certainly all good stuff, and I appreciate you sharing all that you did, and yeah, probably talk to you again soon.
Hey, thanks, Dustin. Look forward to it.
This podcast is a proud member of the Connect EDU Podcast Network. bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at connectedupod. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.